Can you believe they're not even going to charge that FBI asshole? One of the men said in disgust. A lengthy ceasefire was in effect while targets were set up, and the men and women at the range were, as always, talking about what guns people had brought to shoot, who had the best bargains on ammo, and which statist politicians needed to be thrown out of office in the upcoming congressional elections. In addition to these standard topics, talk that day at Knob Creek Range often turned to the disastrous FBI raid in Idaho that had ended 7 weeks earlier. Randy Weaver, his friend Kevin Harris, and Weaver's 3 daughters, aged 10 months to 16 years, had remained in the cabin for 9 days after the FBI sniper had killed Vicky. During the standoff, and at the urging of neighbors, thousands of citizens had converged on the area to keep an eye on what the feds did and to implore Weaver and Harris to surrender so that they and the girls would not also be killed by the federal agents. Messages to Weaver had been smuggled into the cabin by friends and sympathizers, and after considering that his friend Kevin Harris was seriously wounded, Weaver had come out peacefully on August 31st. The entire Weaver incident started with a wood buttstock that was 3/8 of an inch too short, had disgusted everyone at the Kentucky shooting range. Ever since the Ken Ballou raid, however, serious shooters had come to expect disaster when the ATF claimed a paperwork or tax violation that had been committed. Weaver and Lawmaster were only the most recent examples in a long list of this kind of stormtrooper behavior. Up until the Weaver incident, however, citizens had always understood that even if the tax agents destroyed a man's house or smashed his door in and shot him in the head without a proper warrant, the gun owner's family was off limits. Federal marshals killing 14-year-old Sammy Weaver by shooting him in the back, and an FBI sniper blowing Vicky Weaver's brains out as she nursed her baby were a new development. The people at Knob Creek and at ranges, gun shops, and sporting goods stores across the nation found this escalation of federal force extraordinarily repellent. "Ought to at least slap that FBI bastard with a manslaughter rap," the man continued. "Hell, in Time magazine's feds claimed their HRT guys could put a bullet within a quarter inch of where they wanted at 200 yards. "Maybe that was a misprint," one of the other men suggested derisively. "Maybe what the feds said was 2 yards. He thought a moment and then added, "Or maybe that guy did put his bullet exactly where he wanted." Yeah, killing a man's wife while she's nursing their baby daughter is a damned effective negotiating tactic. I can't believe that Yamaguchi fucker, or whatever his name is, gets to just walk away without so much as a $10 fine. "Joe, you're not thinking straight," Henry Bowman said to the man. "The FBI has huge public support. Hoover started a massive PR campaign 60 years ago, and it's continued ever since. Jimmy Stewart movies, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. and his TV shows, the public and the press love the feds. I don't. Maybe not, but everybody else does. Most of the adults in this country can tell you exactly where the FBI shot John Dillinger. In front of the Biograph Theater. Right. But how many people know that the FBI also managed to shoot 2 bystanders in the process? Go to your library and see how much ink that got in 34. Henry shook his head and continued. 60 years ago, was there one word of official criticism or apology for the way they handled the Miami shooting? 6 years ago. Was there one word of official criticism or apology for the way they handled the Miami shootout? FBI's official conclusion was their guns weren't powerful enough. Did you see one newspaper article about how 2 of their stakeout agents were too busy banging some waitress to help their buddies who were getting blasted? Did you see Time magazine saying something like this? Henry lowered his voice in a parody of a news anchorman. The FBI has a thorough training program for handling vehicles they suspect contain heavily armed known killers. Their state-of-the-art tactics include sex breaks to relieve tension, leaving their body armor and shotguns on the floor of the back seats, taking their pistols out of the holsters and putting them on the front seats so they can fly off and get lost, tailgating the suspects to let them know they have been spotted, and ramming the suspects' vehicles off the road in densely populated residential areas to precipitate a gunfight. Humorless laughter followed Henry Bowman's mock news segment, though none of the facts he had mentioned had been highly publicized. They were common knowledge among people seriously involved in shooting sports. Serious shooters invariably had a number of contacts inside of law enforcement agencies. Way I see it, one of the other men in the group said, it's a goddamn miracle Weaver and his daughters are still alive. I'd have expected them all to come off that mountain in body bags instead of just the mother and the boy. Feds must be getting slow, another man in the group offered. In 6 months, the FBI would be back up to speed. I see your water cool's working okay, Henry said to John Parker as he sipped from a paper cup full of soda. Parker was sitting on the seat he had made, which fit on the extended rear leg of the 1917 A1's tripod. Parker's girlfriend, Karen Hill, a paralegal who was with him for the weekend, sat on one of Henry's ammo buckets. Henry and Steve were leaning against one of the concrete benches. They were waiting while the dynamite crew went downrange to make sure there were no unexploded charges left from the 3 o'clock shoot. Yeah, I'm glad you talked me into buying a 17 instead of an A4. You were right, with the muzzle supported in the front bearing of the water jacket, it's a lot more accurate at long ranges than the air-cooled guns. As I think I've demonstrated, Parker said with a grin. Using the click adjustments on the 1917 A1 tripod, John Parker had managed to hit 2 of the 15 dynamite charges the crew had set out downrange. That was exceptional, considering that there were over 50 belt-fed machine guns on the line, and they had all been firing continuously as soon as the range officer had given the command. I haven't seen a single Bush bumper sticker, Henry Bowman said calmly as he took another drink of his soda. John Parker nodded. No shit, I think he's going to lose. Lose hell, Henry said. He's already thrown the election. Parker raised an eyebrow in a questioning gesture. Henry continued. We'd have been much better off with Michael Dukakis from a civil rights standpoint at least. What do you mean? This came from a slender man in a khaki shirt who had overheard the conversation. Bush banned semi-auto imports by executive order in '89, got his drug czar buddy to say it was a wonderful idea. Could Dukakis have gotten away with that? Hell no. He wouldn't have dared try it, because the Republicans in the House and Senate wouldn't have played ball. They'd have screamed bloody murder. Bush got away with it, though, because he's a Republican, and now it's going to cost him the election. Come on, Henry, Parker said forcefully, but without rancor. Bush has all kinds of problems. The economy is lousy, and people haven't forgiven him for breaking his no new taxes promise. And let's face it, Karen Hill added, a lot of voters, particularly women, don't like his anti-abortion stance. Those are the things that are going to end up costing him the presidency. Henry Bowman was shaking his head. A crowd was starting to gather, but no one interrupted. I'll give you the taxes thing, but there's still only a small factor, and I'll prove it to you in a second. Your other issues are curtain dressing. Economy? The economy was terrible in 1982, and the public didn't turn against Ronald Reagan. Reagan was also at least as much against abortion as Bush, and more women voted for him than Carter in '80 or Mondale in '84. The reason George Bush will lose in 3 weeks is because he sold us out on gun rights. Henry Bowman and John Parker both saw a number of the people around them nodding in agreement. John Parker began to protest. That may be part of it, but no buts, John. I'll prove it to you. Look around. How many guys do you see here right now who you know saw active duty and are proud of it? I don't mean everybody wearing camo. Anyone can buy that at Kmart. I mean guys wearing boonie hats and dog tags with their division numbers on them. Or guys in Gulf War uniforms, or old guys with tattoos and shrapnel wounds and arms missing. How many do you see around here right now? A lot, right? George Bush is a genuine war hero from the Second World War, right? And last year he got 500,000 men over to Iraq, ran Hussein out of Kuwait, and only lost, 80 soldiers? That's less than I would expect would get killed in a 500,000 man training exercise with no enemy. The people gathered around were nodding in agreement. So, John Parker said, so Bush is a war hero. I really mean that. And look who he's running against. Should be no contest among vets proud of their military service, right? Henry grinned wickedly at John Parker. Just go around and ask some of these vets here if they're going to vote for the president in 3 weeks. Take your own poll. I'm not, shouted a veteran of Korea who had been listening to Henry's argument. Your friend's dead right. Me neither, spat another one. He sold us out. A half dozen other veterans grunted in agreement. No one contradicted what Henry Bowman had said. Is anyone here, not just veterans, but anyone planning to vote for Bush? Henry asked in a loud voice. No one volunteered with an affirmative answer. John Parker's mouth opened in amazement. Too many Republicans have this crazy idea that since their party usually isn't quite as much in favor of throwing away the linchpin of the Bill of Rights, they can take their own they can take our votes for granted, Henry said, to what was now a crowd of 40 or 50 people. In a few weeks, they're going to find out that taking us for granted was the biggest mistake they ever made in their lives. Except that all the news will undoubtedly focus on the abortion issue or the bad economy or how Bush didn't seem compassionate or some other horse shit and miss the real story. You really think we're the ones going to cost him the election? A man in his 50s asked. Not saying I disagree with you, but everyone always acts like all the other issues are the real important ones. You know, the ones that get elections won or lost. Let me ask everyone here a question then, Henry said. It was obvious he believed in what he was about to say. Pretend I'm George Bush and it's Monday, the day after tomorrow. The first debate, which is tomorrow night, is over. I didn't say anything at all about the gun issue in the debate. It's now Monday, okay? Since I'm still the president, I tell the networks I'm going to give a State of the Union address or a press conference or whatever you call it on short notice. I'm going to give it that night, since the second debate isn't for a couple of days. I get up in front of the cameras, and here's a speech that goes out over every network Monday night. Henry looked over at John Parker. Cut me some slack if I get some details wrong. I'm winging it here, okay? He cleared his throat. My fellow Americans, I would like to address a serious issue which faces our country today, the gradual erosion of the individual rights of our honest citizens. Our government, including my administration, must shoulder much of the blame for this problem. It is time for me to acknowledge and repair the damage that has been done. Henry paused for a moment to collect his thoughts before continuing. The Soviet Union has collapsed. People around the world are throwing off their yokes of oppression and tasting freedom for the first time. It is an embarrassing fact, however, that our government has forgotten about individual rights here at home. It is time to acknowledge and correct the infringements we have inflicted upon our citizens in the name of crime control. Decent, honest Americans are being victimized by a tiny fraction of the population, and it is our government's fault. It is our fault because we politicians have continually passed laws that strip the law-abiding of their rights. As a result, we have made the crime problem much worse. Our great economic power comes from the fact that Americans determine their own economic destiny. It is time we let Americans once again determine their own physical destiny. Henry Bowman saw the audience hanging on his words. He took a breath and went on. In 1989, I prohibited importation of firearms mechanically and functionally identical to weapons made before the Wright brothers' invention of the airplane in 1903. I hoped that banning these guns would reduce crime. It hasn't. The only people denied the weapons that I banned are those citizens in our country who obey our laws. These are not the people our government should punish, and I now see what a terrible decision that was. Some politicians are now calling for a national 5-day waiting period to purchase a handgun. The riots last spring showed us the tragedy of that kind of policy. One congressman has even introduced a bill to repeal the Second Amendment to our Constitution. The Bill of Rights enumerates human rights. It does not grant them. It is something that we in government have forgotten. Repealing the Second Amendment would not legitimize our actions any more than repealing the Fifth Amendment would authorize us to kill whoever we wanted. Henry noticed several people smile at the notion of George Bush acknowledging his responsibility for government intrusions in the State of the Union address. All dictatorships restrict or prohibit the honest citizen's access to modern small arms. Anywhere this right is not restricted, you will find a free country. There is a name for a society where only the police have guns. It is called a police state. The Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights is not about duck hunting any more than the First Amendment is about playing Scrabble. The entire Bill of Rights is about individual freedom. In my recent trip to St. Louis, Missouri, I found that violent criminals have a government guarantee that honest people are unarmed if they are away from their homes or businesses. It's a felony for a citizen to carry a gun for protection. Giving evil, violent people who ignore our laws a government guarantee that decent people are completely helpless is terrible public policy. It is dangerous public policy. Our federal and state governments have betrayed the honest citizens of this country by focusing on inanimate objects instead of violent criminal behavior, and I am ashamed to have been a party to it. It is time to correct that betrayal. Accordingly, I am lifting the import ban on weapons with a military appearance, effective immediately. I am abandoning any and all proposals to ban honest citizens from owning guns or magazines that hold more than a certain number of cartridges. I will veto any bill that contains any provision which would make it illegal, more difficult, or more expensive for any honest citizen to obtain any firearm or firearm accessory than it is now lawful for him to own. I will also encourage the removal of laws currently in effect which punish honest adults for mere ownership or possession of weapons or for paperwork errors involving weapons. I will work to effect repeal of the Gun Control Act of 1968 and the National Firearms Act of 1934 in their entirety. Tomorrow I will appoint a task force to investigate abusive practices of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. I will ask for recommendations as to how that department can be made to shift its focus from technical and paperwork errors to violent criminal activity. I will demand the resignations of all agents and supervisors who have participated in any entrapment schemes or planting of evidence. Our government has betrayed its citizens, and tomorrow morning I intend to start correcting that. Good night. Screams of, "Yeah, damn right, and that's it," came amidst tremendous applause from the several dozen people who had been standing around listening. "Okay, that's the speech," Henry said in his normal voice after the applause had died down. He did not notice the look on John Parker's face. Then, the next morning on the news, you see that Bush has indeed rescinded the import ban. He's named the people on the task force, and he's fired Bill Bennett. A couple of senators have offered to draft legislation repealing the National Firearms Act of GCA 68, and you hear Bush say on camera that he's all for it, and you hear him encourage other legislators to support his much-needed reform. Question number 1. What are all you going to do now? Do everything we can to get George Bush reelected, one man yelled immediately. He was joined by a dozen similar responses. Henry Bowman laughed. Not bad, and we haven't even asked question number 2, and it's the real clincher. If George Bush gave the speech I just gave, and it did the things I just described, how many people who were already going to vote for him do you think would change their minds? How many people do you think would say, "Boy, I was going to vote for Bush, but now I'm not going to"? Nobody, John Parker said under his breath. Anyone who didn't like your speech would already be against the president, John Parker was thinking frantically. Exactly. So he picks up 4 or 5 million votes and loses none. A damn geologist who likes to shoot has just laid out how Bush can pull it off, John Parker said. Wonder if it's too late. He looked over at Karen Hill. You bring your laptop? Parker asked his companion. It's in the car, she nodded, and a smile came over her face. John Parker, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? The young woman asked her friend. Bucky? You got it. Any objections to taking dictation? Hell, I'll sit on Henry's lap and undo a couple buttons on my blouse if that's what it takes. Parker laughed and then explained what he planned to do. Worth a try, Henry answered. Others in the group readily agreed. In the midst of the large crowd, shooters of all of whom had been listening intently, no one paid any attention to the man who left the group abruptly and began walking towards the parking area. Hello, the deputy director of the ATF answered as he picked up the private line in his office in Washington. Working on Saturdays unheard of in this building, Dwight Greenwell thought. But I like having the entire place to myself. It's Riviera, sir, in Kentucky. Something's come up here I think you should know about. What is it? Man from St. Louis at the shoot here knows the president's brother. Guy's name is John Parker. Some dealer, I don't know his name. But like all these guys here, he shoots machine guns. This dealer was shooting his mouth off like they always do. He was going in front of a big group of people about how he wished the president would change his mind on the gun thing. This John Parker was listening, and he gets the idea to get a hold of the brother. The agent explained about the rough content of the speech Henry had made, and John Parker's plan to contact the president's brother in time to save the election. Shit, that'd be just what we need, Greenwell said after he had listened to his undercover agent describe what the two men had in mind. George Bush had given ATF a huge boost with his executive order banning imports of military lookalikes. His expected successor promised to be even more receptive to expand ATF power. The president do an about-face and urge repeal of not only the import ban but all the other laws we enforce, then win re-election, Greenwell thought. Their prospect was not a pleasant one, especially in view of the current internal problems that plague the agency and imminent threat of budget cuts. He sat contemplating all this when his thoughts were interrupted. "Do we have anyone that could intercept the fax?" the agent in Kentucky asked after the silence became too much for him. "Goddamn fool," Greenwell thought immediately. Breaking into the office of the brother of the president struck the deputy director as a good way to get his agency disbanded and himself a visit to federal prison. Talking about it on the telephone was equally stupid. "Everyone said you had a good sense of humor," the Fed assured his undercover man, for the benefit of anyone who might be recording the call. "I doubt the president is going to reverse his position on the strength of some stranger's advice, particularly a gun nut. Even if it does get through to him by his brother. At least I hope he won't," he added, mentally. "If he is, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. Get back there and keep your ears open, though. This is exactly the kind of intelligence we need to know what we're up against." "Yes, sir," the man said, and folded up his cellular phone. Dwight Greenwell sat back in his chair thinking. Wiretapping and electronic eavesdropping, when it involved high-up politicians, was a very risky proposition. The hoped-for benefits almost never outweighed the potential for disaster. John Parker, he thought, as he called up a screen on his computer. Haven't heard that name before. He tapped the name in the keyboard and waited for his computer to find the file. No wonder he's not a dealer. John Parker had a number of machine guns, but he had bought all of them as a private individual with a $200 tax stamp on each transfer. What is it about these damned gun nuts? He asked himself. It is a question he contemplated daily, and it baffled him no less now than it had when he had first taken the job. He sat in his chair thinking about what the undercover agent in Kentucky had told him, and decided to do nothing. A sitting president's businessman brother is one sleeping dog I'm going to let lie. His mind returned to the specter of budget cuts, and Greenwell smiled. A plan was well underway at ATF to solve that little problem. 6 months from now, he thought happily, we'll get anything we ask for. The night shoot was as spectacular as usual. The crew set out drums full of used printer's solvent with explosive charges in front. Railroad flares burned nearby. At the commence firing command, thousands of tracers laced out into the night. Dynamite charges exploded and vaporized the liquid in the drums. The flares ignited it, and huge fireballs erupted one after another. The heat from the fiery explosions warmed the faces of the spectators 200 yards away. The fires died out as the solvent was consumed, only to be followed by more explosions as other shots found their marks at the bases of their remaining drums. Just like a James Bond movie, huh? Henry yelled happily. He was shooting belts of straight tracer in his 1917 A1. The precise support to the muzzle end of the barrel and the constant stream of tracers made the water-cooled Browning shoot like a laser. Henry hit 4 charges, causing an equal number of explosions. Despite the magnificent display, John Parker was only half paying attention. He was thinking about the fax he was going to send as soon as he got to his motel room. October 12th, 1992. The president's brother stared at the fax he had taken from his machine. The timestamp showed it was sent after midnight, Saturday night, when the office was deserted, and had come from the 503 area code. Bush checked and saw that 503 was Kentucky. Parker, Gates & Co., 7700 Maryland Avenue, St. Louis, Missouri, October 10th, 1992. Mr. William H.T. Bush, 120 South Central Avenue, Clayton, Missouri. Dear Bucky, it's worse than anyone ever thought. Today I was in Fort Knox, Kentucky, attending a military show, shooting competition, and historic weapons demonstration that is held here semi-annually. News crews and reporters from England, Belgium, Japan, and other countries were interviewing people. There were over 2,000 active participants in the shooting activities and over 10,000 spectators. Every person I talked to felt absolute betrayal on the part of the president regarding their individual rights. There wasn't one Bush Quail bumper sticker, campaign button, or t-shirt anywhere. Several Gulf War and Vietnam vets were looking at a restored white armored car when the election came up. One said I'd rather cut my throat than vote for Bush. No one stabs me in the back and keeps my vote, the son of a bitch. These were Desert Storm vets. I asked people what it would take to get them to vote to re-elect. The answers were remarkably uniform and amazingly simple. The president can still get another 4 or 5 million votes with the right program. I can lay it out for him to be seen in 15 minutes, and it won't cost a nickel to implement. Bucky, we need to see your brother or James Baker soon. I know the first debate is tomorrow night. He may say something that will lose these people forever and won't be able to retract it. He can get the votes back, but he needs to see how. Call me 24 hours a day here at home or my car. John. Bucky Bush read the facts over several times. It sounded like an idle fantasy. Never known John Parker to blow smoke, though, he said under his breath. Be a miracle if even I can get through right now. He picked up the phone and began to dial. Bucky Bush's fears proved accurate. The White House was in a frenzy, and the president did not return his siblings' call. The brothers did not get together, even on the phone, until after the election. By then, the issue was academic.